Hello. All right. Thank you for being on Super Awesome Data. It is going to be fun to do this series. It's going to be a little different. So this is the first of a new series where we're going to be going through the music theory course uh, together live, which is going to be cool. I just as a by way of a quick background on the course, and then we'll jump in, is when I first created the course, the videos that accompany each lesson were an afterthought. Yeah, the thought was, all right, I'm just going to create these PDFs. There's going to be exercises, quizzes, illustrations, and all of that. And Kristen was like, oh, you should make some videos with these. And I was like, oh, ding, that's a good idea, since music theory, color music is audio visual. That makes sense. So the videos were created, to accompany, supplement the PDF lessons. But what you don't get in these videos is the opportunity to kind of have some sidebars, like we're going to have in this series, where we're going to be talking through some of the points in real time as we go. So as we go means this is going to take a period of time to go through each lesson. We're not going to go through all 20 or really 21 lessons right now. That would be excessive. But we're going to start with lesson 0. Lesson 0 is called lesson 0 because, to me, preamble is often skipped over. I often skip over the preamble of a book or the introduction to a book because I want to start with chapter 1. But lesson 0, or the preamble in this case, really is foundational. It's more for concepts than it is actual practical patterns. But like I say, it's fundamental. So it's really interesting, or it's really important, I should say. I think it's interesting, but super important. So let's jump in, and this will likely evolve as we go. So thanks for joining, and I'm going to read and have some sidebars as we go, and then we can chat about any concepts as well as we cover some of these points. So let's jump in. I'm going to pull up lesson 0, making your own music. And I put little lines along the side of this. I'm going to share my screen and read it as we go, because I'm going to be tempted to have sidebars after every sentence. I think it's going to be tempting for me to do that, but I'm not going to. I'm going to read it, and I think this will be good. So, and especially as we go through each subsequent lesson, that's going to be, I think, even more interesting as we go. But introduction. This is not a course about how to master the guitar so you can play your favorite songs. A course like that would be a waste of time. No one really wants to parrot other musicians. They want to create their own music. You should write your own songs, not just cover other artists. This is what every satisfied musician understands. What follows is a visual system that will change the way you understand music so you can compose amazing songs. Each year, I help guitar players stop wasting time spinning their wheels and get them the insight they need to craft great tunes. This system will work for you regardless of your style or genre. To get the most out of this course, I encourage you to do 3 things. Read each lesson and understand the color music system. 2, filter your song ideas through the system. And 3, write songs that you truly love. Music is meant to be created. Guitarists who learn how to write their own songs thrive. Guitarists who don't flounder. May we all enjoy a life of creativity by mastering the art and science of songwriting. And a quick sidebar here is that it's not just for guitar. That's sometimes a question that I get is, hey, is there a music theory course for piano? Or how about for ukulele? The truth is that music theory is this beautiful universal language between different instruments. And so the same patterns and principles apply whether you're playing the keyboard, whether you're playing a fretboard, guitar fretboard, bass guitar here off to the side, ukulele, banjo, whatever, violin. So even though there's a picture of a guitar here, it's not meant to be limiting in that way. A lot of the illustrations are specifically designed for guitar, but frankly, a lot of the illustrations in the course are, if anything, even more conducive to piano because they're in table format conceptually, and those are lines, straight lines that you can apply directly on a keyboard. So if you play piano especially, definitely check out the course because it can help you a lot. If you play guitar, it's going to open an entire world of, whoa, this is actually how music works. All right, so let's move on. So why most musicians fail? Most guitar players waste enormous amounts of time practicing. We all know how mind-numbing it is to spend precious hours taking lessons or just playing the guitar to improve our technique, but then struggling to write a catchy tune. When we hear our own songs, we wonder why they sound flat, or worse, we question whether our ideas are really as good as we thought they were. But what if the problem wasn't our ideas? What if the problem was the way we expressed those ideas through music? The problem is simple. You really can hear good music in your head. There's just a disconnect between your ideas and the sounds that you can actually make on your guitar. But the fact that songwriting doesn't come easily isn't really your fault. Your only real problem is that you've been playing with a disadvantage, which is that you've been trying to create art using an invisible art form, which is legitimately difficult. It's legitimate. When you think about it, it makes sense. Music is sound, and sound is invisible. So you can't really see a song as you write it in the same way that an artist can see paint, for example. And you can't hold sound in your hands like a ball of clay or watch it bend like metal, which makes it uniquely abstract and challenging. Not only that, but music is also the most analytical of all the arts, like chess, full of patterns and logic and structure. So trying to learn the guitar, let alone write songs on it, is like trying to play chess blindfolded, which is difficult at best, if not impossible, right? I personally have never tried to play chess blindfolded, but I know what that would feel like because I did try to learn the guitar without seeing the patterns that are at play, which is essentially the same thing. Especially as you advance through the course, you see that, whoa, the fretboard is this intricate matrix of beautiful interlaced patterns. And to try to suss that out through intuition is, like I say, legitimately challenging. So, of course, some have figured it out, like folks like Jimmy Page and Lenny Kravitz and John Lennon and Bob Marley, all the auditory and tactile learners who are naturally suited to understanding the guitar without an instruction manual or handbook. You know, the rare few who seem to grasp it all sight unseen, because they can play by ear and just get it, in air quotes. But for the rest of us, people like you and me who are visual learners, the prospects of really cracking the code to songwriting are more slim. Or it definitely seems so anyway, because the options are the options for visualizing music are challenging and limited to only three main options: finger charts, tablature, and notation. Those are kind of the big three. In this course, I'll explain all of these methods and more. And it's true that they can help you build your technical proficiency on the guitar. But that's just it. These visual aids were designed to facilitate performance and dexterity, not to illustrate how music really works or to help you as a songwriter, which nobody will tell you, and I mean no one. Especially the music publishers who exploit our desire to play by selling us sheet music and songbooks filled with finger charts, tablature, and notation, of course, since they want us to be consumers and performers instead, not songwriters. In other words, they want us to stay tethered to the talents of other musicians, like glorified puppets, you could say, instead of self-reliant songwriters, because they have books and apps and subscriptions to sell. And sidebar, if you see the lesson 20, which is the last lesson in the course, I expound upon that idea a little bit more. And so it kind of it's like the bookend to this bookend of the course, and helps to elaborate on that point a bit more. And you'll see some visuals in the video, especially that lead up to that point. So it's hopefully, especially an aha moment. All right, sidebar complete there. Let's continue. So ironically, you find yourself less free than ever, lured to transcendence by the siren song of music, only to plunge into the dark waters of disillusionment, forced into being the cliched cover artist who can't create your own art, or left feeling insecure at least about the songs you do write because they lack clarity and structure, the clarity and structure that you hear in all of your favorite music on the radio. So, what then are you supposed to do? If sound is invisible and your options for illustrating music fall short, then what's the point? Are we simply out of luck? Okay, so kind of a downer opening. It does seem dire. Definitely was the case for me getting into music theory for years and years and years and years and years. It was super frustrating, and thought I was basically screwed in terms of really understanding music and fully immersing myself in the process and being able to express the ideas that were inside of me. But turns out that music theory truly is the path to freedom when it comes to expressing yourself through music. Theory to the rescue. So, like you, I'm a visual learner, so I know the feeling of being stuck, and it's terrible. When I bought my first guitar 25 years ago, updated, that's more like, oh man, it's more like 30 or 30 plus years now. I was inspired by my favorite artists to create, only to end up writing on their coattails, regurgitating their stuff, and struggling to write my own. And the same questions went through my head. Is songwriting really reserved for a privileged few, like some elite cabal in a walled garden with talents inaccessible to the rest of us? I knew that people like the Beatles, for example, had started out by mimicking their own heroes, following in the footsteps of others. But then at some point, they made the leap from being consumers to producers by striking out on their own path. Though, how exactly did they do it? Had they simply learned through osmosis, playing countless songs by other artists? Or was the answer more concrete, more reproducible? Had, uh, well, I discovered after years of searching, reading over 100 books on music, studying hundreds of songs and analyzing compositions for more than 10,000 hours, what I learned is that songwriters don't have any superpowers. The Beatles weren't musicians, nor were the Rolling Stones or Led Zeppelin, Bob Dylan, Bob Marley, or any others for that matter. Instead, what became clear through all this study is that they had somehow cracked a hidden code that guided them in the process. Of course, they couldn't see this code with their own eyes. The songs they created were invisible. Yet each one discovered the underlying patterns of music within their mind's eye, which is amazing. And the way they did this, the way they mastered the art of songwriting, was by learning the science of sound. That is, by learning the principles for organizing sound in such a way that people are compelled to listen, which is called music theory. By that, however, I do not mean music notation. Sidebar, emphasize, do not mean music notation. And that will become increasingly clear as we get through the course, especially in part 3. We really dismantle music notation and show how it is not music theory at all. So definitely keep them separated. All right, sidebar complete there. So in fact, none of the songwriters I just mentioned could read a single note. And by far, the majority of musicians today can't either. So that's not what I'm talking about. And I'm not referring to tablature or finger charts either. What I mean by music theory is more interesting, as it turns out, because at first the phrase itself seems to be a contradiction in terms. Literally, it means the act of contemplating music. The word theory comes from the Greek theoria, which means to look at, view, speculate, or see. Sidebar on the word speculate here. It's not speculation as in hypothesize or guess. Speculate as in like spectacle, spec, to see. Okay, to continue. So, but if music is sound and sound is invisible, then the real definition of music theory is to look at the invisible, which is impossible, right? Or at least it's not very insightful using the traditional methods we have, like finger charts and notation, which look more like braille for the blind than anything else. They really do. Like if you look at tablature and notation, it's a bunch of black dots that without context don't convey much, if anything at all. So with that said, what are you supposed to do? How can you learn music theory if you aren't an auditory learner like John Lennon or Paul McCartney, and you don't naturally understand things like Keith Richards or Jimmy Page? The answer, as you'll learn in this course, isn't to use man-made symbols like these to visualize sound because they're arbitrary and confusing depictions. Instead, the solution is to picture the natural patterns of of sound, that is music, using the natural patterns of sight, color, based on a special and unexpected way of combining them, that is. And when you do this, what you suddenly get is a kind of X-ray vision into the hidden world of sound, where you can literally see what all the best songwriters have grasped all along. You discover all the patterns you can play on your guitar, and you can see the logic of how they function and relate together, so you can use them to compose great and meaningful music. Indeed, the view that's revealed is amazing because what you find is a beautiful and symmetrical kind of geometry that informs the way music works. This is what I mean by music theory. And it's a structure that's totally fractal too, like a cyclical, multicolor branch of audible mathematics that's easy to learn and extremely powerful when you apply it in your own songwriting. So now you can quickly become the guitarist and songwriter that you're meant to be, free to express your ideas with clarity and ease. Freedom, the freedom of expression, truly is the point here. Of course, all this talk about fractal geometry is a bit far out, I know, and the idea that we can actually see sound may seem a little crazy. If you're new here, the idea definitely can seem a little crazy. If you've been around for a while, you'll see that you're not crazy. You actually can see sound. Okay, so that sidebar complete. But as you advance through this course, it will be obvious and undeniable. Color and music really are just two languages that tell the same story, and the story that's told is wonderful. But what you'll find is that there's a definite method to the madness of music, and an order and logic to it all that's as simple, elegant, and intuitive as music itself sounds. Music really is simple. All right, the path forward. So we'll keep rolling and then see where we get here. So music really is simple. It's true. And once you can actually see sound, you're basically unstoppable because finally you can literally see what you're doing and where you're going. That is, you can see every note on your guitar fretboard and you can understand the principles that inform composition so you can progress with real confidence. It's awesome and exhilarating too. And it's how all the best songwriters in history have operated, by leveraging these same patterns and insights of theory. Only now you have the advantage of literally seeing these patterns in vivid color, so you can make your own leap from average or even good today to being truly great. To bridge that gap, I found a lot of people say, you don't need theory to be a great musician. But truly, music theory is what helps you make that leap, is to rise up to that level. Music theory is what makes it possible, frankly. It's just the truth. Though, like I say, there's a method to the madness of music, and therefore a natural sequence to how it all works. So to get the most out of this course, it's important that you move through each lesson in order, step by step, since each concept builds on the previous one. And to show you how it's structured, here's the path you'll follow on the rise to greatness, with an incline that's divided into 5 parts. So here's an overview of the 5 parts. So the lesson, and this is a visual table of contents that is at the start of each lesson throughout the course. And so this is how the 5 parts are divided. In part 1, fundamentals, you master the fundamental elements of music, how to see sound, and how notes and intervals work at the most basic level. In part 2, you learn how to combine notes and intervals into logical chord groups, and then how those chords form progressions. In part 3, you learn how music is a function of time, so you can write songs with real movement. In part 4, composition, you combine all the patterns you've learned into structured, balanced, and compelling songs that sound awesome. And then in part 5, the last part, improvisation, you expand your skills and knowledge to create a wider range of music on the fly and full of energy for the best results. In this way, it all starts with the assumption that you know nothing, introducing the most basic elements of music, notes and intervals, and then expands from there. So you begin at the atomic level, breaking musical patterns and concepts down into their smallest and simplest units. Then you build on these principles until you're composing entire songs that interweave scales, melodies, chords, and progressions, all founded on a solid understanding of music theory. In other words, you aren't just handed a jumbled jigsaw puzzle that you're expected to assemble yourself. Instead, the entire course is designed to give you a clear and complete picture of how music really works, so you can focus on the fun part of actually writing your own songs in a coherent way. And this picture of me smiling, looking into the distance. Oh, I'm wearing the same shirt. That's funny. Clean shaven in this picture, but definitely enjoying myself as I gaze into the distance there. Okay, so in the next 5 parts, I'm going to walk you through these patterns and concepts and help you master the art of songwriting. Once you're done, you will no longer feel confused about how to express your ideas through music, and you'll be writing songs that powerfully engage your audience. Master the art of songwriting. As you walk through the 5 parts of the color music system, simply follow these 3 steps. 1, read each lesson. And just a sidebar on that, definitely read each lesson. Don't skip parts because, well, I'm kind of getting ahead. It's funny, I'm skipping ahead to something I'm going to say up ahead, but really don't skip parts because each lesson builds on the last. Okay. Number 2, after you read each lesson, take each quiz and do every exercise. And 3, apply what you learn on your guitar as you increase your knowledge and expand your songwriting skills. And the quizzes in each lesson are at the end of each PDF. That's where you'll find the quizzes and exercises at the end of each lesson PDF. Okay, so once you complete the lessons, you will have a solid understanding of music theory to employ in every song you create. This means your music will be clear, coherent, and memorable. And remember, clear, structured songs that are coherent make us want to listen. Everyone's ears are already fluent in the language of music, so when you begin using the color music system, you'll finally be speaking their language. The stakes are high. You're going to be tempted to move ahead and skip thinking deliberately about each quiz and exercises. After all, there's so much to see and discover. The course is very full. So it's tempting to just skim it and start playing. Amateur songwriters make the same mistake. They think they know how theory works, so they just start strumming some chords, and a couple of hours later, can't figure out why their song is boring and unrelatable. And I'll tell you why. They had an overview of the process, but never bothered to learn the actual principles. And sidebar, I'm speaking to myself on that. I definitely can relate to that. I wanted to cut to the chase, strum some chords, make some music, and I really did myself a major disservice because I built my understanding of music upon sand. It was not a solid foundation, and I paid the price. But by going back and really understanding the fundamentals, that was what made everything hold up as I advanced. So each lesson in the color music system lays out musical laws that you cannot ignore, or else your songs will suffer and people will tune you out. Thousands of musicians quit every year or let their music fade away, not because they don't have great songs inside them, but because they can't figure out how to express those ideas through music. If we don't closely analyze each element in the language of music, then people will sense that we don't care, and will turn to listen to those who took the time to do the work. But there's no reason for that, because now that you have color music, it's never been easier or more fun to master music theory, so you have the freedom to craft your own great songs. So join me in lesson 1, where I promise you will never see music the same way again. That is lesson 0. That's the preamble of the course, and what kind of sets the foundation for what it's about, why you would want to learn music theory in the first place, or certainly why I lay out this information in the course. Why music theory is important is not to play other people's stuff, as fun as that is. And actually, playing other people's music can be very insightful. You know, I include song insights all the time, because it's insightful to get inside the head of a musician and to see, oh, what did they do? How did they play with these patterns and principles? How did they use music theory to compose their stuff? But it's meant not to parrot them, to be a parrot, but to turn ourselves into our own songbirds, to create our own music and not just regurgitate other people's art. And that was a big thing for me when I first started, is I thought, oh, I would like to make my own music, but I started feeling like I was less than other people. And you'll see music publishers definitely play on that insecurity and even exploit it, making us feel like there ain't no way you're going to be able to be as great as, Billy Joel or great as Jimmy Page. But we happen to own the publishing rights to all their songs. And if you want to play their stuff, hey, here you go. And it's just a foregone conclusion that you have no chance. But that's definitely not the case once you actually learn music theory. All right, let's jump into some of the comments here. So key music, you don't need theory to play others' songs. Yeah, that's true. To pick up a song, exactly. And frankly, learning theory, there is more effort involved than learning tablature. Just like there's more effort involved in writing a short story or a novel than reading a book. Like Da Vinci Code by Dan Brown, just to pick one out of the air, it's way easier to read that than I'm sure it was to write it. You know what I mean? So, and I don't need to have compositional understanding or have done any study other than learn my basics of reading. So that's totally true. And good for Dan Brown's publisher, because it makes it easier. It's a lower barrier to entry for their consumers to read the book. But the point of music theory is not to be a consumer, but to be a producer, to be a creator, an artist. Key music, you'd be surprised how often learning the fundamentals in a different way really impacts your understanding of more complex topics. That's totally true. I'm going to read that again because I think that's well said. So you'd be surprised how often learning the fundamentals in a different way really impacts your understanding of more complex topics. For sure. I think fundamentals, the word fundamentals gets a bad rap because I think, these days, especially, we think of fundamentals as, ABC 1, 2, 3, and we think of these big, chunky letter blocks that, are for little kids, when really fundamentals are, if anything, more important than the more complex things, because they're the base that holds the foundation of everything that builds upon it. So fundamentals are fundamental, they're super important. And the way that you say that is interesting too. In a different way, to learn the fundamentals in a different way can impact your understanding, rather than just going through rote, which is, I think, a lot of the way that learning happens these days. Rote ain't where it's at. So to really understand things is where it's at. Super awesome data. Yeah, I think you said the Beatles broke down every song they liked and found out how to turn that into their own. Yeah, the Beatles were definitely not passive consumers for sure. I mean, they played so many songs. Like if you know the Beatles background, they grew up in Liverpool, England, in the old skiffle days, in the very early days of rock and roll, and would learn all of these songs. Chuck Berry, Little Richard, uh, you know, all these Cochran, like they would learn all these different songs, but not just where do I place my fingers? How do I just hold my muscles in this position, then move them to this other position and play? They weren't robots. They were embracing their own humanity and internalizing all of these patterns and the sounds they were making to create their own stuff. So in one of the lessons, lesson 6, I think it's lesson 6 in part 2, we get into how the Beatles took like a basic 1-4-5, like Buddy Holly would use, but kind of shifted it in a different way. So it wasn't just a straight up 12-bar blues. It was a take on the 12-bar blues. It was something different. The 12-bar blues is a beautiful structure, but it also it can kind of corral your thought in that, you have to stay within the limited range of the 12-bar blues. And so they started to kind of rearrange the building blocks in a way to corral the flow of the music in new and interesting directions. So yeah, for sure, it was a really cool approach. Is this theoria? Is that theoria in Greek? What am I looking at here? That's a good symbol. It looks Russian, actually. So when people say you don't need theory, you're partly correct. You don't need theory to play other songs. Yeah, I think that's a good point, because there's a lot of posts that I make like on TikTok or YouTube where the feedback is hey, you don't need theory. And that is true if the assumption is to play other songs. And honestly, I mean, let's be honest here. When I first picked up a guitar, my full intention was to make my own music. Now, I wanted to also play other songs, but I mean, playing other people's songs is enjoyable. I mean, I love to, I was playing a song by Queen the other day, which is just such a beautiful progression. It's such a great song. But also I'm kind of like, I'm gleaning, I'm gathering information and kind of saying, hey, how do they do what they did? Not just for the enjoyment of playing that song, which is partly it, but also to really embrace the process of songwriting and creation. And so I think it is definitely the ... to play other people's songs. But I think a lot of people have given up hope, thinking, oh, well, there's no chance. I mean, everyone, including the music publishers, are at least implicitly telling me, you ain't got no hope, dude. Like the fact that we have this wall of songbooks means that, every great song has been written, and it's so good and it's so far beyond your ability that just buy our songbook, play, and just take the spiritual painkiller and just play our stuff, when really that's not really what we crave. That's why learning color theory can be very beneficial if you're practicing to be a painter. Yeah, learning the craft, learning the science behind the art is definitely essential. I was going to watch No Direction Home, and the ads were so bad on Hulu, and I started it, and I was like, meh. The one thing I wanted to see if they touch on how this kid left home and 6 months later knew everything. Someone had to teach him theory, right? You know what? I actually don't know the story behind. Oh, it's Bob Dylan. Okay, cool. Yeah. Oh, that's right. So yeah, okay, so what did you find? Did they, I mean, or did they do what everyone does and just present it as this mysterious thing, like he's this mystical creature that has insights? the elite cabal in a walled garden that is inaccessible to the rest of us. That sentence in lesson 0 took me some time to cobble together those words, because I'm like, that is definitely the feeling of just like this elite group of people who have these insights, almost like these, they're wearing these white robes on top of a pyramid, up in the clouds or on Mount Olympus, that we just can't access. So you said I didn't watch it. I see what you're saying. So, oh, sorry. Let me click on that. I didn't watch it. Yeah, not sure. Just wondering if you saw it. No, I didn't. You're probably mystical, etc. Yeah. So that's probably what they did. Is they probably presented it like that. There's definitely a theme. The Beatles literally dressed up as magicians, as wizards in Magical Mystery Tour, to conjure, to use a magical term, the perception that they are up in the clouds. And granted, it's 1967, so I get that there are other references going on there with being up in the clouds, with test tubes, but also just the general perception that these amazing musicians are just off in some remote, elevated state of perception and being and creativity that is just, wow, that would be amazing. Same thing with Kurt Cobain. I talked about him recently, that he literally claimed he didn't know the difference between major and minor chords, which is obviously not correct. Other musicians, I'm guessing, and I could be wrong. Maybe they're super transparent in No Direction Home to say this is how Bob Dylan learned his craft. But I do appreciate musicians that are more open, like Paul Simon has been more open about how a song is composed, that it involves actual patterns, and that it really is patterns, and that there are patterns that do actually make sense, that you can actually create with and use to make amazing music. It's an interesting culture out there. People who don't want to let on that they know more than they do. So, oh yeah, let's see. So Kenny Music, you said, yes, Theoria. I recognize that. Respelled in Russian. Interesting. So the Russian take on Theoria. But I just checked, and it's actually Teoria Musica. That's awesome. Well, for our Russian friends, we know how to say and speak your language. And that's the cool thing about music, though, frankly, actually, in all seriousness, that music theory is this universal language, that music is this natural language that we all can recognize. Like I can be walking through the streets of Tokyo and hear a song and already understand and kind of hear where it's going, and it can impact me in a way, at a visceral level, that I might not understand the people passing me in the street because I don't speak Japanese, but I definitely can understand their music. And likewise, someone from Tokyo can be, walking down my street, hear music from a window, and not understand what I'm saying, but can hear the music that I'm playing and totally get the message. So that's the cool thing about music. It's certainly powerful. And, instead of the old Coca-Cola commercial, I'd like to buy the world of Coke. Yeah, or how does that go? And seeing like it's this meant to be this unifying message, when really, ironically, they're using music as the behind the scenes language, that really that's what everyone's unifying on, is not the sugared water, but the actual music that they're singing to. So yeah, that in essence is the intro to the course. Now, I'd like to teach the world to sing. Exactly. So as we go through these lessons, this is lesson 0. Like I say, it's the preamble. it's the more, we're just talking conceptually music. So the fingers haven't even touched an instrument yet in terms of really getting into these patterns. But as we go, you'll see that we're going to alternate a bit between head knowledge and hand knowledge. A lot of times music is taught from the perspective of, and by a lot of times, I mean, pretty much everyone says, okay, let's pick up the guitar, let's count the beat. All right, let's go. And it's like you're already like running. It's like a little too fast. Think fast, and you're training your muscles. You're learning muscle memory. But with all due respect to my hands, they don't have their own little brains. They're connected to this brain, and this brain is the one that is, running the operation, right? And so you need to, absorb things, wrap your head around things meaning patterns and principles and these concepts of music, and then apply those patterns and send the signal down to your hands to then make the music and put the theory into practice. So, but you can't just be in heady headspace the entire time. You've got to alternate between the two. So we're going to be going back and forth between our head and our hands as we go. There's a lot to take in our heads. We're going to be absorbing a lot of concepts, and we're going to be getting into some like philosophical concepts as we go. But not just for the sake of pontificating about abstractions, but to really bring these ideas into the concrete world of sound. Super awesome, Dad. You said, I read/watched 0 last week, and I'm chipping at 1. Awesome. So I feel like I'm caught up since my color stuff gets in early next week. Very cool. That's awesome. Well, excellent timing for you to be jumping in. And with this course, with this series, I should say, it's a parallel to the course. The course, of course, has its lesson PDFs, its videos, and this live series is a little different, as you can see, is we're kind of talking some sidebars as we go about the different concepts. Now, each series session, I should say, each session in the series is not going to take a lesson at a time. Some of the lessons get longer than this. This is, I think, the shortest lesson, and it's not getting into any exercises or practice. So we'll kind of take it as we go and kind of chop the lessons up as we go. And you can rewatch and take these as refreshers, and we'll have fun doing it. So I think we'll wrap this up for today, and I hope you have a great rest of your day, and stay safe and healthy out there, and we'll talk real soon. And I'll see you on the flip side.